All right. Well, thank you for joining us today and welcome to AI for Finance and Operations. Streamline your business with smarter tools. Before I get started, I want to give a shout out to our members who are joining from Naturally New York, Naturally NorCal, and Naturally Seattle. We're part of the National Naturally Network and have come together today to host this program. The National Naturally Network organization is made up of 11 chapters around the country with over 6,000 members and a reach of over 50,000 people, representing 25,000 companies. Our chapters are community organizations with a mission to foster sustainable and responsible business practices, stimulate conscious business growth, support entrepreneurship, and develop exceptional leadership within the natural products community. 3 chapters invite you to join us for upcoming events. Natural Seattle has an event on the 18th. I should have checked the pronunciation here. The Meave factory tour and chocolate tasting. Naturally New York also on the 18th. Mapping the Risk, State Tax Insights for Consumer Brands. And Naturally NorCal has one of our big upcoming events on October 23rd called Celebrate, big in-person celebration in Sonoma County. And we hope you'll join the Naturally Network at upcoming trade shows. You'll find the Naturally Network at booth 8058 at Supply Side Global in Las Vegas. And we're currently have a call open to exhibit with Naturally Network at the upcoming Winter Fancy Fair in San Diego. We'd love for you to join us. Now, just a tiny bit of housekeeping before we get started. First, we welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat. And secondly, please input your questions into the Q&A box. You'll find both of these options in the menu bar on the bottom of your Zoom screen. The Q&A box really just helps us stay organized so we can save all the Q&A to the end of our conversation today. And now I'm going to hand it over to Dave Hirschkopf, Naturally NorCal board member and founder of Dave's Gourmet. Dave, take it away.
Thanks, Monique, and thank you for everyone for coming. We appreciate it. This is the third of our AI series and the final one for the year. Today, we're going to focus on how you can use AI in operations and finance. We already talked about how to use it in other areas of your company. With AI, Chamber of Commerce did a survey for small business. 50 to 75% of small businesses are using or piloting AI. In a McKinsey study, 71% of CPG leaders, and this is not all small business, have adopted AI in at least one function, and 56% report regular use. So it's definitely getting in there. I'm sure you're all familiar with at least some of the more general applications, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Copilot, Perplexity, DeepSeek. Most of you experimented with ChatGPT at the very least, but we're also going to go into much more specific applications, Xero, Zoho, Ramp, a bunch of others. And then a lot of you probably, whether you like it or not, have used AI because it's built into so many services now. We have a terrific panel today, real experts. They're all founders and CEOs of their companies. We've got Ryan Caldbeck from Waystation AI. We've got Akash Raju from Glimpse. We've got John Zanowski from Weekly Accounting, and they're all going to introduce themselves. So Ryan, could you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Thanks for having me, and thanks for organizing this. My name's Ryan. I'm the founder and CEO at Waystation. I have spent my whole career in CPG, about 20 plus years. I started as an investor at TSG Consumer Partners, an Encore Consumer Capital in San Francisco. And then I started a technology company called CircleUp. CircleUp used artificial intelligence, a different form of AI called machine learning, to help provide capital and resources to brands. I ran that as CEO for 10 years and then started Waystation. At Waystation, we are helping to simplify supplier communication and specifically the procurement of raw materials for food and beverage companies.
Great. Yeah, I've known Ryan for many years, and he is definitely one of the sharpest people in our industry. Akash, could you tell us about yourself and your company?
Hey everyone, I'm Akash, one of the founders and CEO at Glimpse. We help consumer brands in retail automate their deductions management processes using AI. So everything from pulling in deductions, validating them, and actually filing the claims to get money back. Have spent a lot of time building AI tools for the past 5 years across different businesses, and At Glimpse, we work with about 130 brands today, and have been part of the Naturally community for the last 2 years. So glad to be here.
Thank you. Sounds like a great service. Appreciate your coming. Um, John, I actually started reading your book. Well, listening to it. And I hope to finish it soon. Could you tell us more about yourself and your company or companies?
Yeah, nice. Thank you. I've been doing startups for almost 30 years now, and I built five $100 million companies in a row, and then built a portfolio of companies, and then one of them was one of the ones that I co-founded was Assembled Brands. So like Ryan at Circle Up was providing capital in one way to these brands, and Assembled Brands was doing an asset-backed loan against the inventory of emerging consumer brands. So I'm still working with Assembled Brands, but I left because I wanted to use the methodology that we had there across other industries. And so now I have a platform called Weekly Accounting, which does everything, all full service fractional CFO services based on unit economics. And that's how Assembled Brands. I've seen the financials of over 3,000 emerging consumer brands in the last 10 years, and had kind of really synthesized all that knowledge into a certain way to look at these kinds of businesses in each of the channels and understand the unit economics so that you can make better forecasts. And happy to be here. This is great. And Ryan, good to see you. I love Circle Up. Amazing.
Good to see you.
John, thanks for coming. Obviously, a lot of information and wisdom that you get to share today. So, whoever wants to jump in, just starting easy. What are some of the common tasks that can be automated in operations and finance using AI?
It's funny. I'll start here. There's so much money going into like AI bookkeeping, for example, and automating a lot of these things. And the reality is, like Ryan said, like an earlier form of AI was machine learning, and earlier than that was just simple rules. And so the simplest thing, when we're basically closing the books on 300 companies every single week, and the simplest thing is it's been a feature of QuickBooks Online since it was launched. It's just basic rules. And I think there's just so much hype going in. Oh, the machine can do this and the machine can do that. But at the end of the day, I think for most tasks, at the edge of every AI, at the edge of every piece of software, is a human who knows how to use it. And either that human knows how to use it well or doesn't. And that's the thing as a CEO, you've got to kind of, a founder, that you've got to kind of watch out for. And so there's just so many simple things in down to the basics of how a transaction is entered when it hits the bank. And for me, that's where it all starts.
Ryan or Akash?
Yeah, just definitely agree. I think in terms of like ultimately there's kind of a human at the end of it. My background is in engineering, computer science, and when coming into the CPG world, I guess the way that I kind of think about it is bucketing it into a couple of things. Like one, like kind of process mapping where are like the most repeated steps occurring. And that's usually a good place for like automation. So I think, there's automation 10 years ago, there's a term called robotic process automation. Now you can kind of use the term AI agents. It's all the same flow, I think, the workflow augmentation, which is kind of like when you would maybe hire like an outsourced person or something like that to do that repeated task. That's usually a good place to procure AI because you can kind of control the exact workflow, the exact steps, and add a little more reasoning. And I think specifically with like now what we call AI, when you think about like ChatGPT, et cetera, the behind the scenes are LLMs or like large language models where I think it's really good for things like text and like for example like drafting emails or like it's like I use ChatGPT every day just to like brainstorm with me when I'm like walking and things like that. And I think like text-based things are also very good for like AI today. And I think the third bucket, which is not necessarily like pro of necessarily LLMs today, but document processing is like another area where I think you can kind of do a lot with taking unstructured data and turning it structured. And you can use a tool like, so I think those are kind of the three buckets. I know we'll go deeper into these, but in terms of how I kind of approach problem solving and like thinking about operations and finance, those are kind of how I think about it.
Okay, so yeah, that's a great idea, sort of mapping out what are the repetitive tasks in your business, and those are probably the likely places you can implement AI. Ryan, are there in operations and finance, are there specific tasks that you've seen where people can use AI?
Yeah, first of all, I agree strongly with what Akash and John were saying. So to me, we have kind of a framework like what are specific and repetitive tasks and those that have abundant unstructured information. Those are kind of, in my opinion, like the key criteria you want to look for in terms of where you can apply AI. When I think companies have gotten into trouble, they have tried to apply it to a very broad bucket like sales or marketing. A thing that I loved, I'll call out a cautious company right now, like Glimpse would a cautious company focuses on a very specific thing that has abundant unstructured information and a repetitive task. That is where AI has shown to be extremely successful. My favorite thing about this entire panel is that we're focused on effectively back office stuff, which is where you kind of look at the last year or two, like the companies that are getting the most traction are not in marketing or sales in terms of using AI. It's in a lot of the back office stuff where the things we're talking about is true. So specific examples here, I think supplier and vendor communications, again, like repetitive, specific tasks where there's a lot of information, including documents that Akash just mentioned. Invoice and expense management, it's a place that makes a lot of sense. Like Ramp didn't start really as an AI company, but they're using a decent amount of it right now. Data collection and reporting, even if you're just using ChatGPT to ingest CSV files, to generate financial summaries or to read contracts, like it's been pretty effective. So those are some examples.
That's great. So following up on what you were just saying, what are, very granular, what are the AI tools or apps or websites that you all really like in this area?
I'm happy to start, and someone else can jump in. So first, by far, my strongest recommendation is get to know ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini really, really well. Frankly, the difference between those three does not matter for 99.9% of the population using them. So just pick one that you feel comfortable with and go. Um, I was talking with one of our customers yesterday who said that she feels like a Luddite because she's not very good at it. What I would say to everyone on this call is I have met very few people that feel like they're great at it. There's a $8 billion valuation technology company that just hired a consultant to come and teach their team how to use ChatGPT. Like this is the stage we're at. I interview 20 engineers a week. 40% of them don't use coding agents, don't use AI. So you're not alone if you feel like you're not very good at this. Like no one feels great at this. But my first recommendation would be really try to just on a personal and professional level use those tools. Then some more specific tools. I would going back to the framework that we talked about originally, like what are specific tasks, and then do research on that specific task. So Waystation, example, helps with the procurement of raw materials. If you're working with suppliers, if you're the one sourcing or procuring ingredients yourself, that has tended to be a pretty big pain point for most food companies. We help with that. If you are a food company, you are dealing with deductions. Okay, that's a very specific task, and you can use Glimpse for that, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Oh, good. Dave, we gonna
No,
mention?
go ahead. What are some of your favorite ones, Akash?
Yeah, I was gonna echo the same thing that I think like now we're seeing it, if you just follow like tech company news, like some of the largest companies are setting internal AI mandates of like usage in some capacity. So I think at the core, like yeah, like Ryan mentioned, like using ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, it doesn't really matter what is your choice. If you're at a company that has even like Copilot or Microsoft, just getting into the flow of when to start probing them for certain things is super useful. Like taking a step back from like operations and finance, like in my personal day-to-day, I started using a tool called like Gamma.app recently. It's like AI slides. I realized like I'm good at like creating documents, but then as soon as I have to make slides, I slow down a lot. And I think like that's a really good use case where that process mapping for your own day to day, like what are the things that are like the like highest time, lowest lift, and that usually is a good way to think about where AI can be, and then not to like, the kind of mentioning everyone on this panel, but everyone here is using AI in some direct use case to help CPG brands. And in terms of procuring tools, I think it's really thinking about that specific workflow and trying to find a vertical specific thing, because that's what allows for using a tool like ChatGPT that maybe gets you like 90 to 95% of the way there versus a company like Waystation or Glimpse or anything like that, where you can kind of go that extra mile because every day is focused on improving that accuracy. But yeah, I think ChatGPT is kind of a must. And then there's like specific tools, I think, like in your day to day that if you just even do a Google search or like ask peers, they'll kind of recommend. Gamma is like a recent favorite that I've used.
Okay. John, what are some of your favorite specific ones in finance and operations?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'll echo what the other guy said and keep it short. I think the power of just the Gen AI chatbots is a little bit crazy, especially when you tune it. So, I connected it to my Notion where I probably have written over 2 million words, and so it learns to speak like me. And then more specifically, if I point it at a spreadsheet, it doesn't do a great job. But if I tune it and tell it what to expect in that spreadsheet, and then because I'm producing the same kind of financial model for every different, CPG brand, then it does get it, you can make it smarter with more context. And then sort of the simplest thing is, just for a finance guy, if you're doing a monthly financial report, I only have to do those once now. I say, here's the spreadsheet. Here's the words I wrote about the spreadsheet last month, updated for this month. And still you have to go in and double check it, but you've taken the grunt work out of it and made, effectively I'm making a team of analysts like 5 times more productive just with the basic tools that are out there. And I'm curious, that beyond that, I think we're still at sort of the pre-Cambrian explosion of potential here. Like, I'm old enough to have seen the first .com explosion and the first .com crash. Because sometimes I see, oh, this is AI for lawyers. And I'm just like, I'm curious to see if some of these companies might be kind of flashes in the pan, because like they actually have to acquire customers and keep them going. And I think what I like about Glimpse, for example, is it is such like a perfect niche of as Ryan said, complex data that can rote and routine that it's just a fantastic use case for it. But then it's like I don't know how a company like that builds a moat around it as the AI gets smarter and smarter, and I worry about that for my own business.
Great, thank you. Well, as Ryan sort of alluded to, I mean, there's a lot of people that are sort of wondering how to get started or how to dig in deeper. What's sort of the training plan for people that really want to get more involved with AI? Is it sort of experiment with the Chat GPT and then do a Chat GPT or Google search as to like, you know, what what apps would help with the specific needs they have, or do some sort of audit of what are repetitive tasks? So what's a good way for people to get started?
Yeah, and I can start here. I think it kind of is like a culmination of some of the things we've been mentioning, where with ChatGPT, like I feel like a very small percentage of folks are actually like pros or perfectionists in that world, as you kind of say. It's kind of really just starting to use it day to day. I'm sure, with like a quick Google search or YouTube search, there's probably like prompt engineering guides on how to make it more useful for you, etc. But the models are also getting bigger. I think the biggest thing is just kind of like making it like a habit in a way. Like when can you start using it in your day to day? And my recommendation always is to kind of like audit your own day and like the tasks there are and see like what it can be good for, etc. Because I think once that initial use case kind of clicks, it'll be there. It can be in things like helping draft an email as like a low lift use case, or like uploading a document to ChatGPT and seeing what it pulls out, or Yeah, or probing your team on like what are the highest repetitive tasks and then going to find like a solution. But I think it really is just kind of that process mapping and the lowest lift way to get started, to just even start building it into like routine.
I can go. Probably fairly similar. Like we gave a talk maybe 2 months ago to a consumer private equity firm and their CEOs, and like the first recommendation is just like just get started, just open it up and start going. And so what does that mean? Probably reserve an hour or two a week to explore. And let's just take ChatGPT, but again, you can do this with Claude, Gemini, any of them, and start to ask very simple questions like draft an email to the team, draft an email to a supplier, and here's what I want to say. See what comes back. Take a document that you were about to read, ask it to summarize it. Right. I'm working with someone who's trying to buy a food brand right now, and they sent me a really complex model, and I said, I don't know, let's see what it does. The analysis that came back was really, really darn good. To John's point about it not being great at spreadsheets, 3 months ago, I'm not sure that it would have had that same reaction, but like they're getting better each month. And so that was really impressive. I think that's kind of step one, just start playing. And by the way, encouraging your team to play with it too, celebrating those wins, right? Like we have a Slack channel that just says AI usage, and all honestly, like people just post wins with AI or what they heard about someone else doing. I heard John's doing this thing with AI, and it's a way to create conversation, a way to celebrate how people are using it. I used Gamma to create our board deck last week. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. It was kind of janky in some parts, but we're doing it to push ourselves to use the thing. Um, and it also saved me a lot of time. I'd say then the next level down from that is kind of add one task specific, we call it like power drill, where you're just going a little bit deeper, a bit deeper on one specific task. Again, specific, a repetitive task that is abundant, unstructured information. That's the framework we use. And that might be some of the tasks we've talked about here today, but be really, really, it's not back office. It could be procurement. It could be something else very specific. And then I think the last thing I'd say is if there's some people on the call that might be at this level already, but just experimenting with an actual specific workflow tool or building a workflow. So if some of you are familiar with Zapier, building a connection between a couple different products. So can I pull information from Gmail, store it in Sheets, and also post it to Slack, right? And we can talk about that if that's interesting to folks.
Oh, sorry. John, what are your thoughts?
No, I'm still thinking about what Ryan said. I'd love to hear more about that too. Um, yeah, I echo, like at the end of the day, nobody has more than a few years experience at any of this, and I don't think anybody's behind it all. And I think, get out there and play with it and try, and that's, repeat what works.
Okay. I mean, Ryan, I wonder if more people aren't interested. Do you want to go a little deeper into that?
On
Zapier
Zapier. By the way,
and
I
Zapier
know
competitors. Yeah,
I know so many people that don't know how to pronounce the name, including myself. So
Yeah.
if anyone else is confused, you're in. I think it's Zapier, but I don't know.
Okay.
Sure. So the basic idea of the tool, I'm gonna like just really start basic here. It connects other tools together to help create a workflow. So everyone on this call, including myself, does some things repetitively. So for example, I will go to LinkedIn, take some information out and put it into a Google Sheet, right? That is a basic workflow. Akash had a really good point. There used to be, or sorry, still is some companies like UiPath that do robotic process automation. Zapier is kind of a way to get at some of the same point of like, how can we take a repetitive task and connect your tooling together. So let's create some ideas. So one would be like, if you have like a supplier or procurement workflow, and you want to automatically log supplier quotes, right? So the supplier sends a new quote to Gmail. Zapier could theoretically extract the field from that and auto update a Google Sheet or an Airtable procurement tracker. That's theoretically what you could do. Waystation does that today, but that is another way you could use Zapier. That would be a competitor to us, effectively. Or you could use it to, say, create invoice or finance workflows where, a PDF invoice arrives via email, it connects it. Zapier then takes it out of email and can place it into QuickBooks automatically, so you're not doing that, or trigger a payment in NetSuite to go. So there's some basic ways, like those are just concepts. I don't think that those are the right examples, but those are like just general concepts of plugging the different tools together.
Yeah, and I see someone in the chat is a fan of Zapier or Zapier.
Yep.
Zapier. Um,
Yep. By the
And
way,
another one.
Katrina's just real quick. Sorry, Katrina's right. N8N is better. It is more powerful. It is more flexible. My answer to that would be like, yes, and it also probably has a slightly higher floor for people to get started. But if you can get started with that, it is definitely a better tool.
Great. Um, Thank you so much. I appreciate it. What about, I mean, since a lot of people are starting with Chat GPT, this applies to others also, but what are your tips on sort of, the engineering of prompt engineering and how to, how to get the best data out based on what you're writing?
Yeah, I guess I can take a quick stab. And a lot of what I'll say is also kind of evolving every couple of months as like a company like OpenAI releases something new. Like there were prompt engineering guides maybe like a year and a half ago that were really focused on like splicing out data into multiple messages because the like length of the message that you send had to be like cut for it for the model to have enough of a context window, which is basically like how long the chat thread is, etc., to reference. And now I think that things have gone a lot better as well with like the latest models in terms of and there's like guides that we can share after this as well, but ultimately I think it's um like being very kind of direct with the ask. And I personally use like tighter messages in terms of the context of the task, and then keep kind of like forcing it to iterate itself until it gets like a right answer and then referencing that. So that's like my approach, which is like more concise, direct tasks. But I don't, yeah, if others can kind of chime in. I feel like there's guides and best practices. That's just kind of how I've evolved into using it.
Ryan, John, any tips on prompt engineering?
It's interesting specifically on GPT. You mentioned like I wrote a book and put the book in there and then had it sort of analyze my writing, and it almost could do a whole personality analysis on me, and it was obviously strangely accurate. Um, and I guess another one I hadn't heard anybody mention is just like Vercel. It's sort of you can. So what I'll do is I can record a conversation, transcribe it using Otter. I've been using Otter for 5 years. I still find myself taking it out of Otter, putting it into GPT, and then I have a prompt for sort of, particular kind of detailed summary, where it goes through the flow of the conversation and things like that. And then you can take something like that and say, okay, well now, turn it, here's an example website, that I like. Take this conversation and make the text for this website. And then you can just take it and put it into Vercel, and 20 minutes later, you've got a perfect sort of landing page for a particular thing. And it's I guess it's like riding an electric bicycle. It just, you can get so far so fast. And then the devil's in the details, and it does take a little bit of practice. But I guess, for me, it's just fun.
Right, right. Yeah, I think I've used those to plan trips to like 30 different countries. And the interesting thing with prompt engineering is, you'll put in parameters, it'll come a response. You add a few more parameters, and it'll say, "Oh, yes, that's a very, very astute observation," and it sort of changes its answer a little bit. So to me, it's like adding more and more specific parameters, you get better, more specific answers. Is that your experience, Ryan?
Yeah, exactly. We do a ton of this, as I'm sure both John and Akash do. This is a core part of what we do. Um, uh, maybe this is going to be obnoxious, but I'm going to tell you all what I just did, which is put into ChatGPT, give me the best 4 tips on prompt engineering. And they are: be specific, not vague. That resonates a lot to me. Give context about the role. So something like you are a procurement analyst at a CPG company. I have actually found that one to be less helpful over the last 3 months than the previous year and a half. But that's the current advice. Structure the output format. Like, do you want bullets? Do you want a prose? Do you want a table? Like that kind of stuff. And then just continue to iterate. Don't aim for a perfect prompt. I think that last one's the most important. Like, if it's something you really care, if it's super quick about, it doesn't really matter that much. That's fine. But if you really are trying to get an outline for what you want to talk about on today's panel, you probably want to iterate on that quite a bit. So those are the top 4 tips.
Yeah,
I think that you imply the most important tip, which is ask the AI for help on how to use it.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm seeing so many questions here in the chat, and honestly, I would put those into AI first. That's what I would do.
Yeah. So I do a lot of volunteer mentoring and consulting. So I went in there and I asked it for every possible form, marketing plan, finance plan, whatever. And it spent hours, but it created like every document that a CPG company needs. It sort of created. I mean, it's amazing what it can do. But the question is, with all this, you enter good information, good prompts, you get out information. But one of the fears that I think a lot of people have is the sort of hallucinations. How do you know the information you're getting is correct? How do you check it? How do you have confidence?
Yeah, so I can start. So that's a great question. So first, as a general concept, there are open-ended problems and closed-ended problems. If you put into ChatGPT, what are the best 5 or 4 recommendations for prompt engineering? There's no like true answer there. It's a little bit of opinion. It's basing on some experience that it's pulling from. Great. In the case of, let's say, for what we are doing, which is pulling information from emails, PDFs, Excel files, it is a closed-end problem, meaning there's only a certain number of questions that someone asks their supplier. The range of possible answers is actually fairly narrow. You're not covering the world. And so hallucination ends up being a much less frequent problem and almost frankly non-existent when there is a closed-end problem and when you have a bunch of data about that problem. It is another benefit to focusing on a specific repetitive task where there is abundant unstructured information. That is just a general concept. But also I'd say, hallucinations are an issue. I have found them to be dramatically less frequent today than 6 months ago, or 12 months ago. So I think, when something is critical, treat, or just in general, you should treat AI, the answers that come back from ChatGPT, as a junior, maybe mid-level analyst. And if you got a report back, what would you do with that? Well, you'd use your own critical thinking to try and identify, like, okay, does this make sense? Is there anything here that I want to double check?
So sort of use the smell test. Yeah. And then I guess depending how critical the information is, you double check more or less. Is that your experience, guys?
And then for me too, it's like, okay, we can have an hour-long conversation. We can put that into, to get a detailed sort of how did the conversation flow. Then you can pull out the main themes. And then, then you can make an outline, to make like an extended sort of blog post from it. But then like the longer the response, the more it's likely to kind of trail. So rather than that, it would be like, all right, well now let's write this section of that longer post. And I find that tends to also prevent it from getting off the rails. And that, again, it's sort of like managing an ambitious college graduate.
Right. And then with the sort of hallucinations and the accuracy, is that really only a problem for sort of the Gemini Chat GPT level, or at the very specific app level, like a Glimpse or a Waystation or Zapier or whoever? Does that actually happen in more specific apps, or is that only for the more general ones?
Yeah, so similar to what Ryan was kind of mentioning, tied to like closed loop problems versus like things being very open-ended. I guess like the objective of every specific AI company or vertical AI company is to get to the max level of accuracy and tight scope for that specific use case. And there's a lot of like engineering techniques that can be used to essentially minimize as much of this. Like if you're using a model on the back end, there's like engineering formats where you can pull from like factual structured data instead of just having the LLM kind of do everything, or like fine-tuning tactics, like similar to like prompt engineering and things like that, all in the back end. And that's like what the engineering team that we hire is like full focus kind of is. That for this one specific workflow, it's like best in class and like the highest level of accuracy. So I would say when you use like a specific app company or vertical like use case, like that is what everything is focused on, because it's kind of taking a specific use case and applying AI to it. And a lot of those engineering practices, I think, are like improving and getting better every single day. I think if you're like an end user using a model like a chat GPT and things like that's where you as the end user have to like bring as much of that as you kind of can with like very tight prompts. Like I think I saw one of the comments in the chat, but it's like right now a reason that like a chat GPT hallucinates is because I think it's almost like engineered to give us a plausible answer as opposed to having like a system prompt to say like I don't know when it doesn't know the answer. I'd say like at an engineering level, those are the types of practices that are occurring. So I'd say in general, app companies are focused on minimizing as much of that as possible, as like a key focus of the company.
John, how useful is AI? You have financials, obviously every business does, and you just want to pull some insights out. Like, what should I watch for? What are trends? What should I do based on what these are saying?
Yeah.
How do we go about
You
that?
know, that's I get a little itchy with a question like that. Because having, like Ryan, like I've seen the financials of 3,000 emerging consumer brands. And now with our platform, like I have like a measure of bookkeeping quality. And the fact is that most bookkeepers suck. And your CPA isn't focused on helping you run the business. Your CPA is just really wants to make money by filing your taxes. And so the quality of the raw basic bookkeeping data is usually terrible. I've never seen anyone do out of the box a fantastic job of inventory and COGS accounting. No one does. And and obviously as they get bigger they have to get a little bit better at that, but we're talking about sub $20 million brands here, and they're just figuring it out as they grow. And so the real problem isn't like what asking and throwing in some financials and asking GPT to do some analysis on it. The real problem is that the quality of the underlying data, one, is usually insufficient. And then the second thing is it's sort of the wrong map, right? The income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement, that was literally invented 500 years ago. Like the balance sheet that pops in your head when I say balance sheet was first documented when most people believed the world was flat. And since then, all accountants have done is make more rules. So that financial map, all it can do is say, oh, we're going to grow we grew 5%, so I'm going to keep growing 5%. And that's just as completely useless as, asking an analyst to kind of project a business he's never seen. And so for me, for what we do is I need to get the data out of Shopify. I need to get the data out of Google Analytics, and I need to normalize that data, and I need to fix your balance sheet and clean up your bookkeeping. And you can still, even when it's not perfect, you can blur your eyes and look at it and see the underlying unit economics of the business. And people use unit economics ambiguously as well. And they always, as a company, as a startup looking to raise money, you always want to find the magic cohort, is what I call it. Like, oh, okay, well, these 10% of my customers have purchased 30 times. And it's like, great, but you still had to acquire the other 90% that purchased once, and half of those returned it, right? And then I think the AI can't do anything because it's a bad map, just looking at the financials. And so then you need to get all this data and present it in such a way. And in the materials that I shared, there's an article called The Right Way to Look at Your Shopify Business, for example. And then Then you've got to go break it down again because it's one thing to predict your Shopify revenue, it's another thing to predict your Amazon revenue, and it's another thing to predict your distributor revenue, and it's another thing to predict your retail revenue. Where you go, and so each one of those channels needs a separate prediction. And sometimes I just see people forecasting like products on their P&L, and that's wrong. Like you need to do it by channel, and your COGS need to be broken down by channel. And so again, like I've got I'm an electrical engineer turned into a CFO, and I've just done financials on thousands and unit economics on literally hundreds of companies too. And that like the core underlying data isn't, I don't think people understand how sort of off they are when they're looking at this stuff on a day-to-day basis. So to just take financials and throw them into GPT, that is completely garbage in and garbage out.
Right. That makes
I didn't mean
perfect
to be so opinionated.
No, you're gonna get accounting firm hate mail, but it's that's all good. Have you all played with or a perspective on AI agents and AI virtual assistants and because like I'm an ADD person and I've always dreamed of this perfect AI virtual assistant that's basically going to take over my computer and make me efficient. Anyone played with that or have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I
It's
guess I can quickly. Oh, go ahead, Ryan. Yeah, she started.
You go ahead, Akash. I've been talking.
Okay,
Go ahead, Akash.
cool. Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I was just saying, I think AI agents has now kind of become like a very broad term for any sort of like automation that kind of exists that we've kind of been talking through. Even like talking about a lot of the financial and operations workflows at the beginning, like those could all be considered AI agents, I guess, by definition. And I think it all kind of ties back to the systems that they integrate into and like what the scope kind of is. And I think it like with AI agents, how valuable they can become is ultimately tied to the exact like workflows and tasks that they're operating that I think ultimately blends into one, what workflows are they like responsible for? And then two, what systems do they actually have access to make useful? It's kind of the same thing. Even if you kind of hired like a virtual assistant overseas for something, they can only be as valuable as the scope of like access that you give them. Like if you don't give them access to your like your finances, they can't book flights for you or like whatever it might be. And I think in that way, there are a lot of like very tangible, interesting use cases of AI agents that like I've used in my day to day from things like Slack notifications or emails being sent. But then also I think in a lot of like the automations that like at Glimpse that we build where they're doing specific tasks end to end. And you can if you have to process map it, it's like, okay, this is like exactly 4 hours a week for this person's job that can now be taken away out of a broader like 40-hour week. So I think there's like very tangible use cases, especially in like the back office and finance and operations, but it ultimately ties to like what systems of access do they actually have?
There was a good Andreessen Horowitz, which is a technology-focused VC firm, put out a podcast a couple months ago about what is an AI agent. And so they did this kind of survey, and like VCs couldn't say what an agent is, couldn't define what the thing is. So I agree with the way Akash just described what an agent is. And there are other people who would describe it, Dave, more as I think you were implying, which is like this assistant who can just go accomplish a bunch of different tasks. Go handle my supply chain for me. That's so broad, right? Go handle all of my accounting for me. It's so broad. And so what Kosh is talking about is a very, again, specific workflow. In that case, I've seen agents be successful. Where I have not seen any of them be successful is kind of the more like, be my assistant. That I'm sure that's coming, but I don't think we're there yet. At least I haven't seen it.
Yeah. And also, it's coming where, that the tech companies would have groups of engineers, and they figured out there's communication problems between the engineers and the rest of the world. So they created a position years ago, like where that person works with the engineers and sort of translates to like sales and customers. And AI will sort of become like it talks in our language and sounds like a human, but it's not. And you already see people are dating these AI, you know, beings online. Let's go to some of the questions. And if anyone put questions in the chat, I don't know if I'll catch them because I look at the Q&A. So please put them in the Q&A. But starting from the top, how do you feel about uploading confidential financial information to ChatGPT? And I would extend that into AI in general. Anyone want to address that?
I sort of threw an answer into that one. I think it's a much bigger problem if I'm an enterprise, and I'm a big company, and and I think it's a much bigger problem if I'm sort of have if I'm like I actually have a license to be a CPA, which I don't, right? And so then in general, we're working with quite small companies. They're just getting started. They have a few million in revenue, 20, 30 million, up to 20 or 30 million. And at that stage, what we train our people on is you can either put the words in there or you can put the numbers, but don't put the words and numbers together. And so then, if I'm just looking at the numbers of a business that remains unnamed, that's a reasonable level of security given the size of the company and the risk associated with it. That said, I am probably the most liberal sort of, the machine already knows everything. It's already in Google. It's everywhere. It knows everything. And I sort of, to a large extent, punt on that kind of security, and and that might offend a lot of people too. But at the end of the day, these are some numbers, and I don't even know what the company name is. Tell me what you think of these numbers. Feels secure to me.
Okay, that sounds good. What about next question? They asked, what are your thoughts about perplexity? But I'll expand that to, what are your thoughts about the different main ones, DeepSeek versus Perplexity versus Copilot, Claude, Gemini, which focus on perplexity, but what are the main differences?
Yeah, I can quickly chime in. I'd say like at this level of maturity now that we are, I guess, in the adoption cycle, like they're all like fairly similar. Like for example, a year and a half ago, Perplexity was like the first one that connected to the actual internet. So you could like get actual searches similar to Google when like ChatGPT didn't have it. So for example, in that specific lens, like Perplexity in terms of my usage has really good insights tied to like Reddit, Reddit posts and threads in terms of like I used to use it for like restaurant recommendations, etc. But now they're like pretty similar. And I think each of the corporate LLMs as well have their own unique use cases. Like Notebook LM has been something that some of our team uses internally because you can like plug them in directly into like Google Drive and get like pretty good insights tied to Google Drive. I honestly think like, and then like, like 6 months ago, a lot of people were raving about Claude in the engineering community because it was better for engineering use cases, etc. But I would say as like an average user, which is like 99% of the population, it doesn't really matter which one you use. I think it's just kind of getting started in that way. But Perplexity specifically, I think they were kind of the first to like connect to the actual internet for real-time like insights and stuff. And I think they're making new strides on things like trying to go into the browser for like the AI agents. I think they're releasing something called Perplexity Comet in that way. So everyone will kind of have like slight differences in their value propositions, but for the general use case of like a chat interface, I think they're fairly similar.
Okay. And what about they're asking about platforms for better visuals and design. They've been frustrated by ChatGPT. So it's the sort of Canva world, isn't it? So would anyone want to address that?
I'm going to ping our designer about that, and I'll come back to you in a minute.
Okay, we'll skip the question, come back. Um, so what are other products like Ramp that are out there from a fractional CFO? John, you're on mute.
I,
Yeah.
Yeah, Ramp is a much newer and more modern Bill.com. And I think the great thing about those anywhere I can create a virtual card, and I can use one virtual card for my ad spend, and I can use one virtual card for this particular vendor and one virtual card for that particular vendor. That sort of streamlines the data collection and reporting at the source. And I think all of those are very good. Ramp is definitely like, well, I used to live and die by Bill.com, but Ramp would be the one that we use the most now. And then, you know, this again, like at Assembled Brands, we built a system where I would ingest data from Shopify and Google Analytics and all these, you know, and all the different warehouse platforms, so I could have all the data about our whole portfolio, you know, to some extent while we were underwriting them, and definitely while they were in the portfolio. And we would be able to predict you know, our borrowers business better than them almost every single time. And I think there's a bunch of tools like that where you can integrate data from lots of different applications. And I think that's one of the, you know, tools like Coupler, just ETL tools where you have to set them up each individually and customize to pull the data out of these other places and bring them all into one place in an automated way. I think those are the things that have helped make sort of you know, the fractional CFO practice that we have now is scaled to about 350 companies and 5 million of revenue, and it's because of these automations and tools. I would say that we use AI between, as they say, like the eraser heads and the chiclets, right? Something very specific, and then, you know, okay, for this piece of code, I need it to look like this, and then you can go to the AI and have it do that. The rest of these things are really just workflow automation, which I think is way more mature and even easier to do now because of the tools, the AI tools that help you build them.
Right.
John started with that with something I think somewhat subtle but important, which is like he has seen a bunch of them, and he said Ramp's the most common, or that's the one, I forget if you said recommend, but whatever. Same viewpoint here, and same viewpoint for I think literally every founder that I've ever talked to. When they've explored it, they've come back to Ramp. Ramp's been the best. So my recommendation would be to not recreate the wheel on that. I have no equity in Ramp, by the way. I posted some, back to the other question about branding, design, AI tools. By the way, going back to the framework we were talking about originally, just consider branding and design and marketing is like, that's a very broad, unspecific task that is not very repetitive. There's not abundant unstructured information. So you could expect that the tools in that space may not be as effective as you want them to be, which has definitely been my experience. We've experimented, we have, and we still use the tools that I listed here. They are not the tools that ChatGPT recommends, by the way, if you put it in a ChatGPT right now. Which I can tell you what those are. It's like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion 3, Figma, Adobe Firefly. But I have not heard founders talk about a lot of success with any of the branding marketing tools. All kind of a little bit janky.
Right. And you definitely have DALL-E and Adobe
Mhm.
and all that pop up too in
It
the design thing.
we had a designer who made something just so amazingly beautiful. I'm like, wow, did you use AI for that? And I was like, how'd you do that, AI? And he goes, no, 8 years of design school, right? And then he just made the point. He made the point that, yeah, we used to have to send photographers to get stuff. Now we have, you know, stock photos, and then we used to have to manipulate them by cutting out the pictures, and you know, now we have Photoshop, and now, you know, so in the hands of a designer, these tools are incredible. But you know, it's just like when I look at most people's spreadsheets, I think they're using them like a coloring book. And so I think it depends at the end of the day. Like the AIs are great if you really know how to use them, and you can get better at using them in your own expertise. I can't get them to make pretty pictures at all.
Yeah.
One really quick point, which I don't think is going to be very relevant for most people, but it might be for some. Our designer has found that the most valuable, and the designer she talks to, the most valuable design tool right now is Cursor. Cursor allows you to kind of skip a step as a designer and put something into practice, build an actual site. And so she can play with a tool live and have customers play with the thing live.
Okay. We're running lower on time, so let's do speed round, like Kramer on TV. So quick answers. What's your experience with inventory forecasting with AI, Ryan?
I don't, not a lot of conviction in my answer, but the experience has not been positive.
Yeah, this one, I think at level 1, all I do is take new inventory purchased, inventory sold each period, weekly, monthly, quarterly, you know, ending inventory, make a roll forward, and then I can make a revenue forecast, and I can predict sort of how much inventory I need to buy. Then it's a whole level 2 analysis to figure out which SKUs to buy. And I imagine at that level 2 analysis, if I gave it, say, hey, last quarter I sold this much at this mix, and this quarter I have the exact same mix of products. What do you think the mix is going to be at the end of the day? That's just like a really simple math equation, and you don't need AI for it. And then in terms of being able to predict different things, like especially if you add in a new product, it's definitely not going to help.
Right. What's a quick recommendation for managing your email inbox?
It's a prosumer tool, so it's like $30 a month, but I use Superhuman and I kind of like live by it. It's just like a email client on top of Gmail. It has like shortcuts. It's a it's like a 15 to 30 minute onboarding, but it actually has saved a lot of time for me.
Massive +1.
Um, Outside the main LLMs and your companies, what are your favorite AI apps and best AI apps for CPG companies? Everyone throw out one or two quick names.
I just posted an answer to that, a blog that I wrote. I think Akash has a similar or another blog he can post as well. If you have to use one AI tool, use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or any of those. If you want, I mean, I can give you there are specific ones listed in this blog, but really I would start with that.
These are great, Ryan.
Okay. Just trying to wrap up on time. So I believe that all of you offer some sort of, if people have additional questions, there's some way to contact you and you're happy to talk to them or email them or something. Is that correct to say?
Absolutely. They have our emails, right? We can post those. There we go.
Yeah. And
Thank you,
then
Monique.
I think you all even offer some additional information that you have in writing, sort of summarizing parts of the approach to AI, right?
Yeah, that's what Akash and I just posted. I think Akash, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. We just put it in the thing here, and I think Monique just wrote that she's going to include those resources in the recap as well.
And then as a gift for anybody on the call, if you get comfortable connecting your QuickBooks and giving us access to Shopify, I'll do a full unit economic analysis of the and sit with you and talk to you about it. It's sort of, I built assembled brands just by talking to founders. And so it's sort of my favorite thing to do. And if you trust it enough, there's the link. If you connect your QuickBooks there, that gets the process started.
Okay. And then, yeah, and then if people look through the chat, there have been a lot of great resources posted. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time. And I think the message that between this and some previous webinars that went out is, at the very least, just go and chat GPT or your favorite LLM and just experiment. Custom GPTs and all that and specific apps are another level. But if you have questions about specific situations or how to audit, looking for repetitive tasks, feel free to reach out to any of the panelists, and they can certainly help you there. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
On my wish list is I wish I had a Ryan callback bot that I could ask questions that would just tap in. Your answers were so precise. Well done. Thank you. It was nice to be here with you.
I
You could
appreciate being on with
probably
all of you.
you could probably make like an AI assistant that has his voice at the very
Thank you all. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone.